Welcome to A Bevy of Bloods, a fan podcast of the Sydney Swans Football Club. My name's Noddy, joined as always by Stevo, and in this episode number 12, we're going to talk about the game just played against the Dockers, a few general topics in the AFL and VFL, the game ahead against the Blues, and finish off with all of our tips for the rest of the round. So to all you Cygnets and Swanlings out there, fluff up your tail feathers and settle in for a potentially biased yarn about all things to do with our beloved Bloods. On Saturday, the 22nd of May, in front of just over 29,000 people at Optus Stadium in Perth, the 6th place Swans came up against the 10th place Dockers. And after a solid first half, the Swans went completely AWOL during the third quarter. And even though we managed to peg our way back into the fourth, ultimately Fremantle's captain Nat Fyfe and his mongrel kick got the home side a very close victory, scoring 12-14-86 to Sydney's 13-6-84. Okay, Stevo, first impressions. What did you think of that?
Yeah, it was a bit of a letdown in some ways, wasn't it? I mean, to paraphrase John Longmire after the game in his press conference, and we could have won, but we didn't. Besides one terrible quarter where they totally outplayed us, we played pretty well for the other three. And we won all of those quarters. We were a better team for those three quarters, I think. And, Perth's always a tough away trip. The Western Australian teams play really, really well there. The crowd has a big role in the game there. And we probably should have been up by more at halftime. 15 points probably wasn't enough. We should have hoped to been up by, 20 plus, even 4 or 5 goals or something. And also, I guess it probably wasn't the best time to get Fremantle. They'd come off a run of 3 losses in a row. They're a decent team. I don't think we should underestimate them as a good side. And they were at home and they needed a win and they got it. So, good on them.
Yeah, fair call, mate. My first impressions was that it was another close game in the wet versus the Dockers. So it seems to be like we're building a pretty decent rivalry with these guys. So, that's good. I think for fans of AFL, they would have watched the game and thought it was probably a decent game. Not so much for Swans fans who were chewing their nails during the third quarter. But as we've said, and we will say a couple more times throughout this podcast, we were good in the first, second, and fourth, and just completely dropped off the radar in the third. We also need to say that Nat Fyfe and Rory Lobb had, in particular, those two guys had fantastic games. But we've spoken. I thought we felt a little bit short in the back line. Now, obviously, Lobb's a tall bloke, so that might have been one of the reasons, but we can dig into that a bit later on when we look at some stats and stuff. The other thing is that Dockers still managed to score more behinds than goals, but they got the win. All right, so in terms of your key takeaways, Stevo, what were they?
I think it comes back a bit to what we were talking about last week with how the ladder's looking and where teams are placed. And this just showed very clearly that there's a group of teams that are currently ranked between about 6th and about 12th that are all roughly at the same level. And so that's us, the Giants, West Coast, Richmond, Fremantle, Carlton, and probably a couple of others that are on the fringes of that, like Essendon, St Kilda. All around about the same level and all aiming for those bottom 3 spots in the top 8. We played one of those teams away and we got close, but we didn't quite get there. One advantage we do have going forward is that we've banked a couple of wins against top 4 teams in Geelong and Brisbane, but we really can't afford to be dropping many more against this sort of 6 to 12 team if we want to stay in contention for the 8. That was my first sort of thing thinking about the game afterwards. And then I guess the other thing, once the frustration of losing a tight game had gone away a little bit, I think there's a tendency to maybe overreact to a loss like this. If you look at it from maybe a bit of an outsider perspective, maybe, but at least without the strong fan goggles on, we lost by 2 points at one of the hardest places to win in the country. No other non-Western Australian team has won there this year. We played a decent side that's roughly in our sort of level, that was really, really hungry for a win. We were the better team for 3 out of 4 quarters. As we've talked before, young teams are going to struggle with consistency week to week and even within games. And, we also put in one awful quarter against the Cats and the Pies, but we were lucky that it didn't cost us. And this week it did. So, it wasn't a disaster, maybe more of a disappointment. And I guess the other thing that adds on to this in terms of where we're at is, I think it's important to remember that in all but one of our losses against the Gold Coast, where we got done by 40 and just got blown off the park for a lot of the game, we've been in every game that we've lost with a chance to win in the final couple of minutes. So we've lost games by 2 points, 9 points, and 2 points. And all 3 of those teams are teams that have got genuine finals claims, and one of them is a team that's got genuine premiership claim, which is Melbourne. So I think we're looking pretty good, notwithstanding a disappointing loss to Freo over there in Perth.
Yeah, okay, yeah, they're good points, mate. Look, for me, I think, obviously without Buddy, who was on absolute fire, just classic vintage Bud, and I think we're going to talk about him later on as well. We probably would have and could have been completely smashed, blown off the park. But, as it was, he's averaging 7 goals a game at Optus. He's only played 2 games there, but still, he just sees it so sweetly there. And you look, wow, he was just unreal to watch. I think some of the commentators were saying maybe the Swans should petition to play a few home games there. And who knows, look, maybe if there's a few more coronavirus hiccups, maybe there's a WA hub this year. You don't know. You never know. But maybe the Swans end up being based in Perth and playing the rest of the season at Optus. And maybe Buddy reaches 1,000 goals this year. Who knows? We don't know. We'll talk about that later on. Look, for me, there were a few critical what-if moments in the fourth quarter by some young players that had things gone our way and a few other decisions had been made, we very well could have stolen the victory. And then, as it were, it wasn't the case. And, we obviously we've very much made our own life harder by losing, a winnable game. And so the position in the top 8, as you've already mentioned, is very likely to become more and more fragile over the coming weeks, especially if we don't improve. All right, so let me talk very quickly about the quarter-by-quarter breakdown. Obviously, we've spoken about how the game was a game where we were in it for 1, 2, and 4, and then just completely went missing in the third. So let's have a look at that. In the first quarter, we scored 4 goals, 0 behinds. Fremantle 3 goals, 2 behinds. So we won by 4. And then in the second quarter, we scored 5 goals, 3 behinds to Fremantle's 3 goals, 4 behinds. So won that quarter by 11 points and took a 15-point lead into half-time. Third quarter, 0 goals, 1 behind to Sydney, and that was Dylan Stephens in the first minute. Unfortunate not to get a goal there. But Fremantle scored 4 goals, 5 behinds. So they won that quarter by 28 points and then took a lead into the fourth quarter by 13 points. In the fourth quarter, we bounced back quite well, and we scored 4 goals, 2 behinds to Fremantle's 2 goals, 3 behinds. So we won that quarter by 11 points, but ultimately we were defeated by 2 points. So that's how it played out on the scoreboard. In terms of stats, Stevo, throw me some numbers, mate.
We've got a couple, actually, especially relating back to what you were talking about in that third quarter. Well, I mean, really, if they'd kicked better, they could have been up. They could have won that quarter by 40 points, couldn't they, if they'd been more clinical going forward. But, 69 to 45 inside 50s, including 20 to 7 in the third quarter. That's 10 more than their average for the season and 10 less than ours. So when you've got that much ball coming in, it's very hard to stop a team from kicking a winning score, 69 inside 50s. And that's our second lowest inside 50 tally for the year, after a very low 39 against Geelong, which we actually won the game. And then every other game has been 53 plus. So that was a big drop off for the Swans, is the inside 50s. And then also talking about getting the ball in, but also what we do when we're inside 50 is we only had 6 tackles inside 50 to 16 against Fremantle. For a bit of comparison, last week against Collingwood, we had 29 and our season average is 13. So we were less than half our season average for tackles inside 50, which is another big drop off. And then the other thing, it's not really a number, or not really a stat, but it's more related to a number, which I want to draw a bit of attention to, is 22. So the AFL every season at the end of the year, they announce this, best players in the comp that are 22 years or younger. And to be eligible for that team, you need to still be 22 years of age when the season finishes. So on the day of the grand final. And we've got 8 players who are eligible for that team and 1 who is almost, but not quite. So Ollie Florent is a couple of months too old. His birthday's in July, so he's 2 months too old. That's it. He almost qualifies. But of the other 8, we have McCartan, who had 17 touches, did a pretty good job in the back line. Then Rowbottom, 15 possessions in that game, not his best day. Warner, 12 touches, again, not up to some of the standard we've seen from him earlier in the year. Stevens, 10 possessions. Blakey, 8. Wicks, 7. Hayward, 5. McLean, 5. So that's a lot of those younger guys who have been getting quite a bit of spark out of that didn't really contribute against the Dockers. And yeah, that was the final number that I had. I think you've got some more that add to that.
Yeah, I've got a couple to work through here, mate. So I'm going to start with scoring shots. We had 19 to their 26. That notwithstanding, we were actually more accurate. We were 68% conversion rate. So that's our second best of the year after that win against Geelong, funnily enough, where we were 70%. And again, that number that we talk about most weeks, where the percentage of inside 50s that turn into goals, how 30% is a great mark for striving to be in the top 4. We actually had 29% of our inside 50s turn into goals. So didn't have that many of them, but we made sure that we turned them into goals. But that notwithstanding, the weight of inside 50s, as you've already said, Stevo, was just beat us. It was too much to handle. And every Swans fan would have been watching that third quarter going, where the bloody hell are we? And stats really reflect the reality of what we're seeing. And there's more stats that made for very sad reading on top of the ones you've already mentioned, Steve's. Disposals, we were minus 31 in differential. Marks, minus 8. Contested marks, minus 6. We had 0. Inside 50 tackles, minus 7, 0. Clearances, minus 5. Hitouts, minus 5. Inside 50s, minus 13, as you've already said. Intercept possessions, minus 5. The only things we managed to get ahead of them in were tackles. So we had plus 2, so 13 tackles to their 11, and centre clearances plus 2, so we had 3 to their 1. But obviously had no effect. And then we had our contested marks. We had 6 for the game, and they all took place in the fourth quarter. Funnily enough, 3 of them I think were from Buddy. But in terms of contested marks, Brennan Cox, who took 5, completely stifled McLean's impact. He had a very good game, and as I mentioned earlier, Rory Lobb. Brilliant game, really, moving from ruck to forward, scored 4 goals. 3 of his goals were from contested marks. Up until now, much had been made of Freo's lopsided, goals to behind count, and it actually continued for the game against the Swans. If we remove their loss to Melbourne in round 1, in which they also kicked 8 goals, 10 behinds, and the Adelaide win in round 5, where it was 12 goals, 12 behinds, then we're left with 8 out of their 10 games that they played this year where the Dockers scored more behinds than goals. However, of those 8 games, 4 were losses, and all of those losses were played away, and 4 of them were wins. And all of the wins were played at Optus Stadium, as you've already mentioned, Stevo. So I think you had dug into that a bit deeper, and you had another point to make there, didn't you, Stevo?
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, I saw this headline saying Fremantle's poor kicking is costing us games, and I read through the article. I think it was on the AFL website. I can't remember. Maybe it was somewhere else. But so I did a little bit of look just at their matches that they've lost just out of interest, and what I discovered actually was that certainly they're kicking terribly. Like they're kicking at 40%. They're the worst in the comp. And per a point of reference, West Coast is the best in the comp. They're kicking it just on 60%, and that's the top of the league. So I went back to Fremantle's losses where they had kicked more behinds and they had kicked goals. And I converted their scores as if they had kicked at 60%, which would be the competition leader rather than what they did in that game. And they still only got ahead in the Essendon game. So 3 of those 4 losses they had where they kicked poorly, they got beaten by enough that it actually wouldn't have made a difference to the end result. But then what that still shows is that they are kicking very badly, and it's only cost them 4 points so far, but if they keep doing it, it might cost them a lot more. So it's something that they really need to fix.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. The Essendon game was quite close, wasn't it? It was 7 points or something in the end. I think that was the week before us, I think. But yeah, well, excellent investigation work there, Stevo.
No worries.
I certainly appreciate your hard work. All right, mate. Favorite moments? What were your favorite moments of the game?
It was a bit of a weird game because even though we lost and it was a disappointing loss, there was there was a lot of highlights reel worthy moments in the game, especially quite a few of our goals that looked very, very nice. So one that I'm going to pick up, it was in the last quarter, and I think anyone who listens regularly knows that I'm a big fan of Will Hayward and Isaac Heaney, the pair of them, especially when they're waxing in the forward line. And there was a moment coming into the fourth quarter, like 3 or 4 minutes into the start of the fourth quarter, where we hadn't scored a goal since before half time, and it gave us a bit of a spark and kind of picked us up. So I think the ball comes in, Hayward roves a ball, gets a quick handball out to Heaney. Heaney gives a quick one out to Parker, loops back around, gets it off Parker, and kicks a very, very nicely balanced goal that would be, well at home on any highlights reel. And that was the moment that sort of got us back into the game. And I think it gave the guys, and then Buddy went boom, boom, boom after that, and we were ahead. But that was kind of the spark for me. So I really liked that moment. And the other one that I've got for this week, nothing to do with the actual play. This happened at halftime. There was a bit of a scuffle at halftime, which I think we'll talk about a bit when we talk about the match review officer stuff. And Buddy got involved in a bit of a scuffle with Fife and Ryan and a couple of others, and got his jumper torn right down the middle of his chest. So his shirt was wide open. You could see all of his tats on the front part of his torso, and he's got this beautiful butterfly tattoo right in the center of his chest. And I love that because a couple of good friends of mine, I'll say hi to them, to Nadia, Kat, and Leah. We've been talking about butterfly tattoos for quite some time, and I think Buddy has given us a beautiful example of, if you want to get ink on your chest, get a beautiful butterfly right in the middle. And yeah, thanks, Buddy, for the inspiration.
Fair play, mate. So you're going to be sporting a buddy butterfly sometime soon, hey?
Yeah, don't tell my mother. I hope Mum doesn't listen. I know Dad listens. I don't think Mum does, but Dad, if you're listening, don't tell Mum. But yeah, you might get a little Buddy 23 butterfly motif somewhere around my person.
I'm sure both your mum and dad would love that deep down, mate. I know they're Bloods fans too, mate. So
they certainly
all
are.
Good. All good, mate. All right, for me, I had a couple. Obviously, the Chad worked his way in there for me. Second quarter, 13 minutes left. Rampy kicked it from the back wing. Heaney contests. Hickey deftly roves on one leg and does a nice little handball to Warner, who's running through. Warner puts the Jets on and kicks long from about 55 to skid it through. Just a very exciting moment. Unfortunately, didn't have too much more impact in the game, which was a bit off on his form from recent weeks, but still a wonderful moment. My other favourite moment was the play leading to Buddy's 5th goal, and the guy was unreal. We're going to talk about him in the next section, but yeah, just unreal to watch, really. You could have chosen any of his goals, but I'm looking at his 5th goal particularly. It's in the fourth quarter, about 16 minutes left. We had a kick in play on by Lloyd, kicks it to Rampy in the back pocket. Rampy kicks it to a contest. I think Mills was the one who brought it down. And then Rowie sort of weaves in and out, picks up the ball, handballs to Heaney, who handballs to Florent, who kicks further down the line to Buddy. Buddy does a nice pickup. And then basically, I think he handballs to Josh Kennedy, who then gets it over back to Warner, and then Warner feeds it back to Buddy, who's offering great support, good stamina running through, and then basically just bombs it from 55 metres out, lands right on the goal line, and gets us back within 2 points. And it was just like, here we go. Here's Buddy. He does the big, left-handed, I think right-handed fist pump. Yeah, come on, boys. And it was unreal. I just thought it was fantastic. So those two fantastic moments, I'm just going to do a quick foil, a bit of a good, bad, good sandwich, although I've gone good, bad. So what if moments? I'm going to quickly touch on two what if moments that I know a lot of Swans fans were quite disappointed. Let's be real, they were, obviously gutted about. And it was late in the fourth quarter. And it was a couple of minutes left. Dawson's spoil, his decision to spoil rather than take the mark. And then later on, Florent's long bomb to Papley, 2-on-1, rather than lowering his eyes and kicking to Hayward or Heaney, who were both free around the 35, 40 metre mark inside our own 50. All right, Stevo, tell me what you think. Were you as mad as most of the Swans fans out there, or do you have a position on both these moments, or what?
I don't know about mad. I mean, mistakes happen in footy, and I think the Florent one was clearly a mistake. He took the wrong option. He should have looked inside and hit one of those two that you mentioned that was running onto goal, and maybe we got a different outcome. But he didn't, and that can happen in the heat of the moment. You think there's a couple of seconds left, and you just get the blinkers on and think goal square. But yeah, certainly if he had it again, I'm certain he would not take that option. The Dawson one's a bit tougher. I don't know. I think that one, because Dawson's coming across at a different angle to where the ball's coming from and also to where the Fremantle player is. And so he's got to make a very quick decision about the risk versus reward of taking a mark and not clunking it or fisting it across the line. So I think I've got more, I guess, sympathy for Dawson's plight, especially given that it led to the match-winning goal, that throw-in. But, at the end of the day, you're actually thinking then, boundary is good because we can clog the ball up, try and get a clearance down the line and get another stoppage and suck some time. So yeah, the Dawson one, yeah, I would have loved him to grab the mark, but he didn't.
Yeah, and I think, look, obviously we watch the replay and we watch these moments over and over and over again, often, or I certainly do. I think you're the same, but it looked like, that Liam Henry was off balance and that he probably had a bit more time than he thought he did, and he probably could have taken the mark. It was just unfortunate that then it led to that passage of play where our midfield wasn't able to shut down Nat Fyfe with that sort of that ball that he threw on his boot that went through for their winning goal. So, but Dawson is not the only culprit there, really, if you think about it. So, whereas Ollie, oh goodness, I think he'll definitely want that one over again. I was throwing things at the TV at this point, Stevo. Like I was,
no.
Yeah, that was infuriating for me. But still, hopefully our young players will learn through this, because Dawson's only, I think he's 23, 24. And Ollie, as you said, is 23. So they're young players, they've got a lot to learn. So hopefully they can take these moments and become better from it. But in terms of the ABOB medal, which is our best and fairest, Stevo, we select our 5 best Swans players on the ground using the 5-4-3-2-1 scoring system, with 5 being the best. Stevo, kick us off. Who are your top players?
For me, clear best on ground for the Swans was Lance Franklin, 5 votes, 4 to Dawson, 3 to Lloyd, 2 to Papley, and 1 to Mills.
Awesome. I also had King Bud with 5 points. I had Callum Mills with 4, Jordan Dawson with 3, Josh Kennedy with 2, and Tom Rickety Leg Hickey. Rickety Hickey is a nickname I'm working on, but I think I'll have to keep working on that. I'm giving him 1 point just for the fact he played basically a whole game on one leg. All right, so players we had the same. We obviously had Franklin, Dawson, and Mills the same. So why don't we just have a bit of a general chat about those 3 players, starting with Buddy, mate?
Oh, Buddy was amazing. He 6 goals, 10 score involvements, which was the most for the Swans. He was back to what he was like before he had his longer injury layoff. Like, that was absolute vintage Buddy Franklin, the way that he was and I think we were chatting before we started recording, and you were saying that, the bloke that played on him, was it Griffin Logue was his name?
Yeah, Logue.
Yeah, Logue. And you were saying, he didn't have a bad game either, and he didn't. Like, it's just that Franklin was on. And for Logue, it's probably one of those days that in 30 or 40 years he'll tell his grandkids of the day that he followed the best forward of the modern era around Perth Stadium for 2 hours. So what do you do when a bloke's playing like that? Loved his game.
Yeah, it was unreal, wasn't it? It was just like, it was a joy to watch, really. And I think that non-Swans fans would have loved that as well, because when Buddy's on fire, there's almost nothing better to watch. I think Dusty on fire is pretty close, but Buddy on fire is a different kind of genius, right? He's just, imagine, we're talking about having an average of 7 goals at Optus from 2 games, admittedly, but, if it went for that third quarter, this guy could have kicked 10 goals, oh, wow. Yeah, 18 disposals, 10 marks, 3 tackles. He loves a tackle, right? I mentioned earlier 5 inside 50s, and we're thinking maybe those inside 50s were actually majority of his goals, because he was bombing them from 50 meters plus. So they may not have been, forward 50 entries, but rather goals. But yeah, just a performance for the ages. And I think, a lot of people, I think the coach, he got, top points in the coaches' votes as well, and deservedly so. And it was just great to see him like that. I think we're going to talk a little bit about Buddy a little later on. So, all right, let's talk about Dawson and Mills, mate. Go for it.
Okay, Dawson, I thought I gave him. He was my second best, and there was quite a few in that sort of second to maybe seventh or eighth or 10th best that could have been juggled around a bit. But I set it on Dawson just because I thought he played a really mature and quite composed game, a good defensive game. The way that he delivered the ball and brought the ball out of 50 and also, through the ground was really, really important. So that's why I had him up the top. And then Mills, another really good midfield game from him in my top 5 players. He just keeps playing really, really well.
Look, I'm not going to lie. I had Dawson. I thought the game that Dawson had prior to that spoil was worthy of 4 points. Certainly wasn't going to knock Buddy out of the top position, but it just got under my skin a little bit. So I bumped it down to 3 points, but still had a fantastic game in his own right. He had 31 disposals, 6 marks, 5 tackles. 5 tackles, I don't think I've ever seen him lay that many tackles. But I think the guy had something, how many 17 rebound 50s, right? So we think that's the opposite of an inside 50 where, you're exiting your defensive 50. So obviously, because the Dockers had that many inside 50s, not all of them became goals and they had a lower conversion rate than us. So there's going to be times where our back line are going to get the ball out. And, I think Dawson was one that benefited from that. But he had a very, very good game. I think certainly one of the best I've seen him play in a while. So, it's fantastic to see him in that form. For me, Millsy, same reason as you, but for the third quarter, right? I think we could say that for mostly everyone. He would have been on track for a monster game. He ended up with 26 disposals, 6 marks, 8 tackles, 2 goal assists, 3 inside 50s, 7 clearances. Yeah, he still had a very good game, even though he went missing in the third. So, yeah. All right. So players that we had differences on. So you had Lloyd and Papley, Lloyd with 3, Papley with 2, and then I had Joey with 2 and Hickey with 1. So why don't you go with Lloydie and Papley first, mate?
Yeah, I was just thinking with Lloyd. He was more one of those ones. He was quite similar to Dawson, really. He played that same sort of role in maybe a slightly different way. Lawson's more got that raking kick, and Lloyd does a bit more of the, I guess, shorter stuff and bring the ball down the line. But yeah, definitely for the same sort of reasons as Dawson, I thought Lloyd had a really good game. And then besides him, I suppose the main one that with Papley, his forward work was really good. He only had a small amount of the ball. He had maybe 12 or 13 touches, something like that. But then he got 2 goals, which was our second best. He got 2 goal assists, which again was our second best. 8 score involvements, again our second best. And when we were transitioning the ball through him, or whenever he was at the fall of the ball inside 50, I thought we looked really dangerous. So that's why I had Papley in there.
Yeah, no, they're very good points, mate. I had Joey 2 and Hickey 1. Look, again, but for the third quarter, I thought Joey had a pretty solid game. He did have a few clangers. I know he had a couple of those missed kicks in the first and second quarter, which was disappointing. But I think in general he was one of the players that helped us get back in that fourth quarter. 28 disposals, 4 marks, 6 tackles, 5 inside 50s, 5 clearances. So I thought he had a good game. And then finish off with Hickey. Wasn't as influential as he has been in recent weeks. He didn't get anywhere near the amount of clearances he'd been getting, but I just gave him 1 point just for the fact that, as I was saying, he's basically running around on one leg. And I just thought that was a very brave effort. So rewarded him with that 1 point there from me. All right, mate, if you've got nothing else to add there, I'm going to move on to Fantasy Update.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
Okay, mate. All right, I'm going to give a quick update on our AFL fantasy team, a bevy of bloods consisting solely of current Swans plus a few ex-Swans to help us out with injury cover. In round 10, ABOB scored 1,612 points and ranked 62,466 within that round, which leaves us sitting at 69,419th overall, approximately 2,000 places better than last week. The top 5 scorers of the game: 4 of the 5 high scores of the game were our Swannies. The highest scoring Docker was Rory Lobb on 120, which was the second highest score of the game. The top 5 Swans were Dawson on 122, Franklin on 119, Mills on 111, Kennedy on 105, and Lloyd on 102. A fantastic thing, obviously, was Franklin's performance, and it reflected in his 119, but it could have been 131 if he didn't give away 4 free kicks against him. The free kicks against attract -3 points, so you have to deduct 3 points. So he had 4, so it was -12. So he would have had 131, which I think would have been the highest score of any forward in that round, but I need to double check that. Certainly 119 is great. 131 is a massive score. Nevertheless, Millsy scored 111 points this week, which is exactly the same as what he scored last week against Collingwood. So you can see he had another big game. Imagine if he played in the third quarter, he would have had a huge score. But he backed it up like a boss nevertheless. And I threw the captaincy on him. So we got automatic double points. So his 111 became 222 points. So super stoked about that. One minus was the apart from the 5 players I mentioned, no other Swans got anywhere near 100. So that we had 5 players that with 100 plus, and then the rest really just dropped off from there. So that third quarter killed us in fantasy too, mate. In terms of trades, we've got Juzzy McInerney waiting on the bench to come in if any players are dropped or need to be dropped, either through injury or form. But we'll actually talk about that a little later on in the preview section. All right, so we're going to move over to the match review office, and Stevo, you are going to let us know a few things that happened this at the end of last round.
I guess first of all, I was a bit surprised not to see anything come out of the push and shove that happened at halftime. The little scuffle between there was a few of them involved, Fife and Franklin and Dawson and Ryan from the Dockers were probably the main instigators of it. Nothing came from that. So I guess that's that. And then, just because that's probably not something that you would think the AFL is wanting to have, on prime time on a Saturday night in their time slot. But yeah, nothing came out of it. And then I guess leading into that, this idea of, this sort of walk away message from AFL House that they're trying to push, because it seems somehow inconsistent with all of the AFL's messaging around what happened with the Richmond thing a couple of weeks ago, that, you should walk away. And it was a bit curious to me that nothing more was made from it. Maybe they just wanted it to disappear. I don't know, to be not picked up on so much. But yeah,
I reckon, mate. I reckon that had to be the thing, because it came up quickly and then disappeared very quickly, didn't it? But what happened in the end? It was they got fined, didn't they?
Richmond did, yeah. Richmond got just today it came out. Richmond got a $20,000 fine, or it's money that's going to go to a men's charity actually. But so it's effectively a fine out of Richmond's pocket for Shai Bolton's role in, the word they used was exacerbating the recent nightclub fight. And that's why I found interesting with the comparison with what happened in the Swans game, because that's kind of the exact same situation that these guys find themselves in on a Saturday night when they're out at the nightclub at 1 o'clock in the morning, right? You got a scuffle that's probably about nothing, but then it turns into something more. And I thought the contrast between the two was quite interesting to observe.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of it like that, mate. Look, I thought Fife whacked Warner twice around the head, and Dawson was well within his rights to give him a bit of a shove in the back, and then it just escalated from there. But yeah, it was funny, foiled against that thing that was happening with Richmond, wasn't it? In terms of the tribunal, we had a couple of cases. What were they, Stevo?
Well, there were 3 tonight, like Tuesday night, where we're recording on Tuesday night, and there were 3 that have just come up tonight. And one was Lockie Plowman from Carlton, who got done. He was found guilty for his hit on O'Meara. He was sort of charging in. There was a bit of a mark ball coming in, and O'Meara got concussed, and so he was given 2 weeks, which was upheld by the tribunal. Carlton are talking about appealing it. We'll see what happens over the coming days. And then Pickett from Richmond whacked an opposition player, got a week. Richmond took it to the tribunal. I'm not sure why. I don't see how that was ever going to be downgraded, but the week was upheld. And then Holman, the one that got most of the attention from the Gold Coast Suns, did what you would look like it being a perfect chase down from behind tackle on Duncan from the Geelong Football Club. Duncan whacks his head on the ground accidentally, and the original decision from the AFL Match Review Office was 2 weeks. The tribunal threw it out. He's clear to play.
Oh, good, mate, because I saw that one, and that was everything you would teach a player how to tackle a player from behind. He chased him, awesome 20-meter chase, got him, and then rolled. And it was just obviously unfortunate that Duncan's head hit the ground, but there's really nothing that I thought Holman could have done there that he didn't do. And I also saw the Plowman one. I thought, maybe grey area, but yeah, I don't know. Like, I thought he probably didn't deserve 2 games, but still, the Pickett one was so obvious. He just tried to take his head off. Like, I don't know why they tried to fight that, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
it seems like the messaging seems a bit unclear again, doesn't it? It's a bit hard to see what players need to look out or be wary of, right?
Absolutely. I mean, because the thing that really gets me for this is, okay, everyone's happy now. We've got the result that everyone called for in the media, that Holman got off because that was a perfect tackle and he shouldn't have got 2 weeks. And the tribunal has said that. But the tribunal is separate from the Match Review Office. Dave Christensen, I think is his name. And he represents the AFL. That's AFL House. So the AFL is saying, we think this is a 2-week suspension for that tackle. And then the tribunal is saying no. So what happens next time? Does the AFL again say 2 weeks and the tribunal throws it out? I mean, it's a mess. I don't know what's going to happen really going forward. I guess we'll find out if and when the next one comes.
I wonder if it's a liability thing. The AFL just sort of saying, well, we told you this is a bad thing. This is on you, tribunal, for letting them off. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess it's very important to protect the head, but there just needs to be clear, consistent messaging. And unfortunately, it changes on a weekly basis. But I think you had a point about Sean Higgins, didn't you, mate? Something you told me beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, and this has been, because when I first saw it, my first reaction was this. And then in some of the media stuff I've seen has picked up on it as well over the last couple of days. My first instinct when I watched that, because you sent me the link saying, watch this, it's crazy. And I saw a bloke execute a perfect tackle from behind, rang him down. And I thought, what's Nod on about? What's wrong with this? And then my first instinct was, maybe it's Sean Higgins. This is how to not shepherd and protect a teammate. Because if you look back at it, he's just he flicks his arm out and then just keeps jogging, And if you want to teach people how to tackle from behind, then use that footage. If you want to teach them how to shepherd, then maybe find something else.
Yeah, I think he's just there to pad the stats and win a flag. But anyway. Who knows? We got Paddy coming back in, so you want to hope that Higgins, is working hard to keep his spot. But you never know. You never know. All right, mate. Well, let's keep an eye on that. But let's move on to the next segment. We're going to talk about a few hot topics in the AFL and the VFL as well. So let's start with a VFL update, which I think you're going to do, Stevo.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, not much to report really. The game was live streamed on the Swans YouTube channel, I think, but there's no replay available, so I haven't seen the game. And we know that the Swans were up by a point at half time and then got overrun, I should say, to lose by 40 in the end against KC Demons, which is Melbourne Demons affiliated club or whatever the relationship is. I'm not sure of the details. And you haven't really seen any match report yet, nothing detailed either from that. So there's just a few tidbits in some summaries on some various news websites. So the best players, from what I can find, is that Gould played well, McDonald, Bell, O'Riordan, Gray, and Brand were all listed in the best. Logan McDonald kicked 3 goals. And that's really it from the game. And you asked me before, did Zach Foote play? The former Swans listed player, Zach Foote, is now playing for KC Demons. Yeah, he played by look of it, by the team lists, but we don't know how he went. So that was it really from the reserves this week. And next up is Carlton, 11:30 a.m. before the seniors on Sunday this coming week at the SCG. At least it's listed for the SCG and live on KO. So you can watch it on KO. We'll be able to get the replay of that one too. That means, which is good.
Awesome. Fantastic, mate. They obviously heard us say why have we got the VFL team on after the seniors. But, well, there's plenty of Swannies coming up in that Carlton VFL team. Want to look out for Riley Stoddart, Harry Reynolds and Cody Hurst. Stoddart had a few games. Reynolds never got on, and Cody Hurst was one of those players that came in as a bit of a cover, I think in a pre-season or mid-season sense. But still be good to see those guys have a run against their ex-mates. Look, one thing I will mention, Stevo, is I was rewatching the Collingwood Swans VFL match, and I think I texted you this during the after I heard it, and I think it was after the first quarter break or the halftime break, where you could see the footage. The camera was basically on the boundary fence, and you could see the senior guys walking off. They're all in their training gear and joggers, and you've got like the likes of Jordan De Goey and Pendlebury strolling off, and that clear as day you could hear on the audio picked up. There was either a diehard Swans fan, or I'm putting this out there, a diehard Carlton fan, screamed at them, "What are you going to teach them? You guys couldn't even get the win. You guys are bloody hopeless," or something like that. And then you hear like someone from Collingwood say, "Oh, settle down, sweetheart." Like it was one of those interactions where I thought, "Oh, what a heckle." There was one lady on her own who stuck around to throw a boot into the depleted Magpies. I thought it was fantastic. Worth mentioning now. Sorry. Wasn't in our plans to mention, but it just popped in my head, and I thought I'd add that. But one other thing very quickly on that game against Casey, I went to their website and I watched a highlights reel of all of Casey's goals, and there were a lot of them. It did look like Gould was beaten in certain cases, but if we found reports saying he was good or one of our best, then he obviously had an impact elsewhere. So I'm hoping that's the case, especially as you and I have been talking about. Hopefully he gets a debut in the coming weeks. So that's one to keep in the back of our mind. Stevo, we're going to talk about the Indigenous rounds coming up. So this week and next week, this year's Indigenous rounds. So I thought we'd just take a little bit of time to talk about our favourite Indigenous players from the Swans over the past years. So who are yours, mate? Okay, let's limit it because there are a couple. Let's just look at your favourite current or ex-Swan who is Indigenous.
It's tough. There are three, and it's the same three that I think anyone is going to say. So Franklin, Goods, and O'Loughlin. So I'm going to go a bit left field. We can talk about those guys in a minute. But when I was younger, like as a teenager playing footy, one of my absolute favourite Swans players, and he was only at the Swans for a short period of time, was Troy Cook, who ended up spending most of his career over at Fremantle, funnily enough, who just did a number on us this weekend. But he ended up playing close to 200 AFL games, really, really strong career. And I really loved him as a youngster because he was one of those players who just threw himself in everything. He was kind of like, almost Paul Kelly style, like that level of ferocious attack on the footy. And so he was a player as a teenage footballer, learning the game, that I really modeled myself on a lot. So I'm going to say Troy Cook is one of my favorites. And then of the big three, I'm going to pick Goods, but it's tight.
Yeah, I mean, Goodsy, legend. I mean, literally Australian of the Year. Fantastic. I'll go back to those guys in a second. I just want to have a few shout outs. Derek Kickett got in the 96 grand final, that we both went to. He was instrumental in that year. I remember him just being like just a fantastic player, dangerous around the goals. So one of my favourite very early players. And then who can forget Lewis Jetta's sprint against Cyril Rioli in that grand final. He was just such a key member of that premiership year. So just a few shout outs to those guys and those moments. But yeah, for me, it's, as you said, it's Franklin, Goods, and O'Loughlin. Goodsy's, it's unfortunate the way, all the racism stuff that happened. It was truly regrettable because, maybe he plays another season and a half and gets 400. But he's had a totally glorious career, right? 372 games, I think. 2 Brownlows, 2 premierships. That's among the best of the best, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you mentioned the way that he exited the game and how unfortunate that was, because I think what we have in Adam Goods is not just an example of an absolutely gifted footballer, 2 Brownlows, 2 premierships, club best and fairest, goal kicking medals, everything. But we've got an example of someone who is an amazing role model, both for Indigenous people, but for Australians in general, I think. And that's how I will always remember Adam Goods, as an amazing footballer, but as just an amazing advocate as well.
he's just a fantastic human being, and it makes me so angry thinking about what he went through. Like just like almost like how dare all those people treat him like that? But it's they made those documentaries, and if anyone hasn't seen them, please find them and watch them. I think it's important. It's almost like an exercise of closure, but otherwise education. So it never happens again. And the AFL are getting behind that and making sure that that sort of thing doesn't happen again. We just have to make sure that they follow through. And then these rounds are part of that process, and it's a fantastic thing, to embrace the the origins, the heritage, and all the past and present players that grace our game really. Just a quick shout out to one of the Swans boys that I go to the footy with, Elliot. He's an English guy, a mad Manchester United fan, so he follows another red and white team there, so that's fantastic. He plays a bit of soccer, football, in his local Sydney comp. It's an amateur comp. He actually plays against Adam Goods every now and then, because Goodsy plays in one of the teams that Elliot comes up against. And I'm always like, oh, how'd you go against Goodsy? He's like, oh, yeah, pretty bad. He's an athlete, right? Basically, Goods runs all day and scores goals. I think he was actually a soccer player before he switched over to AFL or Aussie rules seriously. But just thought I'd give that quick anecdote about Elliot and how he plays against the man, the legend, Adam Goods. I'm also with. Yeah, it's a good story, isn't it? Yeah, but yeah, he's as good at amateur soccer as he was at professional Aussie rules. But just a legend, really. I saw him in a cafe a couple of times and tried to get a selfie with him, but I thought it was a bit rude, so just sort of marveled at him from a distance. But he's totally approachable by all accounts, so I probably should have just manned up and said hello. But anyway, we're also going to just very quickly talk about Buddy as one of those other players, and Mickey O, legend, but also a legend, 05 premiership player rather. But Buddy Franklin, right? So 6-1 against the Dockers. AFL industry is up and about as Buddy's up and about. It's sort of a bit of a barometer, right? Buddy plays well. People get a bit excited. They know he's one of the all-time greatest goal kickers. He's currently sitting on 963 goals after the effort against the Dockers, which is the 7th highest of all time at the moment. He needs 8 more goals to overtake Jack Titus, who played for Richmond between 1926 and 1943. He scored 970 goals at the end of his career. So Buddy needs another 8 to get past him. And if he does that, he will become the 6th highest. Look, 1,000 is sort of this, future figure that people throw out there. Only how many players is it, Stevo, have reached 1,000? I think it's 5.
I think
so. Only 5. Yeah, 5 other players in the history of, AFL, VFL, VFA, in the history of this game have kicked 1,000 goals in a professional sense. So he needs 37 more goals to reach that. I think it's been documented in the media. If you look at his last full season, which was 2019, he had a few injury issues at the end of that year, and also 2020. If we look at 2019, his average that year, he kicked 2.875 goals a game. So if we use that number, which is his last recent usable number, then we could say he could kick 37 goals in 13 games. And there are 12 home and away games remaining this year. So if we make the finals, goals in finals count. If we make the finals, it's possible, there's an outside chance that Buddy could kick 1,000 goals this year. Obviously, his body needs to hold up. Obviously, there's a lot of other, factors that come into it. But what do you reckon, Stevo? Do you reckon we're on track this year? After a performance like that, are you up and about or what?
He's a chance. I also, just looking at this now, I hadn't thought about this, but now that you say that he's 37 shy of his 1,000, I quite like the fact that he's 37 shy, which was Adam Goods' famous number coming into the Indigenous Rounds. I think there's some nice little symbolism there or something.
Yeah, look out. Okay. We've cracked the code. So obviously if he does it, it's definitely off his own bat, but maybe you and I had a small part to play in that if we want to be complete narcissists.
Well,
anyway, look,
let's put it out there. Let's say that he needs 37 at the beginning of Indigenous round. Let's say Mickey O used to earn 19. Do you reckon he can get it down to 19 by the time the Indigenous fortnight is over? Probably not.
Okay, so he needs to kick like
a lot of goals.
A lot of goals in 2 rounds. He needs to get 2 bags, basically.
Yeah.
He needs to kick it like eight goals and 9 goals or something like that. Look, if anyone can do it, it's Buddy. So, let's not put the moz on him, but let's also say, anything's possible, right? But it will be truly fantastic. And Steve, I really wish you were in Australia for the day that Buddy kicks 1,000, because, people, and fingers crossed it's at the SCG, we're going to be running on that field, mate. And I think about that, and it just makes me feel very warm and fuzzy. But anyway, we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves. One game at a time, and obviously the team comes first. So speaking of teams, all right, we're going to go on to the next segment, which is the preview of the round ahead. So in this section, we're going to focus on 3 games, most importantly, the Swans' next game. And then we're going to look at 2 other games of interest, one introduced by Stevo and the other by me. After that, we'll finish up with running through the rest of the tips for the round. So Game 8 of Round 11 is a home game for the still 6th place Bloods, taking place this Sunday, the 30th of May, at the SCG against the 12th place Carlton Blues, with first bounce at 3:20 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Okay, Stevo, so how did the team pull up after the Dockers game? What's our injury status?
We had a couple. The first one, Fox got what looked like a poke to his eye, like a bit of a scratch on his eye. And based on what was said from the club earlier this week, probably he's not going to play. They're going to take it cautiously with him. So Fox is likely out, which is a shame because he just got back into the team from his previous injury and was getting himself established and playing some good footy. So it's a shame to see him go out. Hopefully he's not gone for too long because he's a valuable player. And then Hickey hurt his knee again, played out the whole game who knows how he played out the game. Some combination of painkillers and strapping tape seems to be what got him through the 4 quarters. But
sheer will, drive, determination.
That's it. Yeah, all of those things got him through.
And maybe there's an element of Samson. What was that story? The hair. Is it? Maybe his strength lies in those curly locks, mate. Who knows? But more realistically, pain jabs and strapping tape.
Yeah. Let's go with a combination of all of the above. So Hickey might be an out. So they're the 2 likely, at least forced outs. Any other outs would be omissions.
Yeah. Okay. So all right. So if Hickey's out, then Sinclair in, right? So Naismith has played by now a half against the Pies in the VFL, and we think he probably played majority minutes against Casey, but we don't know. It's probably too soon for Naismith to leapfrog Sinclair, wouldn't you say? If Hickey's out.
Yeah, a game and a half maximum in the reserves probably isn't enough. So you'd think Sinclair's the one in.
And look, Sinclair's serviceable. He did the job when we were out of rucks basically last year and for the half the year before that. So, he's ready to come back in. He's a ready-made player. If Fox is out, does Gould finally get a game?
He's a chance. Depends how they go about it. Either you bring in a sort of a set defender like they would do with, Hickey out, like a ruck out for a ruck in. But then who do they bring in? Who's sort of putting their hands up in the seconds? There's Gould, there's O'Riordan, and then Milliken possibly if he's fit. He's been coming back off an injury, so maybe him. But then we've got 3 quite tall players down there. Or does McInerney come straight back in from his week off with the rest? He was managed last week against Fremantle. Does he come straight back in and play more of a half-back role rather than on the wing where he's been playing? Because he's been playing quite a defensive wingman role anyway. He's been pushing back quite a lot. So maybe he does that. I'm not sure what they're going to do, actually.
I think probably the way that they'll go is to bring McInerney back in because I think he was managed because he was they were wary of his back. He had a few back issues in the preseason. Obviously, with Goulden and Campbell going out with these stress fractures, they were worried that maybe that might happen to McInerney. So he was managed for a week. So it's probable that he comes back in. But yeah, does he play that sort of lockdown, small defender that Fox has been or can do very well and has been doing past couple of weeks? And I'm wondering if, I do agree with you that McInerney has been playing more defensive in his wing role, but Florent also has been running back and helping out in the defense. So maybe there's a sharing of roles there between McInerney and Florent. If one isn't looking good, then they switch it up, and because they both can obviously play wing, but yeah, they can also help out down back. So yeah, I think you raise a good point. If we go with three tools, obviously, we're going to talk about Carlton a little bit, who their gun players are, but they have a few tools down in their forward line. So yeah, maybe we do go with that three-pronged tool. And I did mention that I thought we're a bit short against the Dockers. You seem to think that we're okay with basically McCartan and Rampy as our two tools, because Rampy can basically play as effectively like a 210 centimetre player. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they go. I think every Swans fan is pretty keen to see Gould get a run in the seniors. For anything, we just want to see how he goes. But also, I think you and I have spoken about this a lot. If he doesn't get a game soon, he's a quality player. He's going to be snapped up by an opposition team. So maybe this is the week. Possible omissions, though. Okay, let's talk about this. Elephant in the room. There was a lot of hate against Nick Lizard Blakey running around on Swans chat, all the forums and on Facebook and stuff. And I think it's clear to say that Blakey didn't have his best game against the Dockers and that he is out of a little bit of form. Does he get dropped? Does he need another couple of weeks in the VFL? I tend to think he does. What do you think, mate?
I think that he hasn't. You say, yeah, like he hasn't had his best week. He hasn't had his best season, really. He's not been great. And the thing with me when I watch him a lot, he always seems to be like he's often trying to do a bit too much with the footy, like not just doing the simple stuff. Like he's often looking for that extra game breaking play rather than just doing the basics. And I think they're a bit stuck though now, because I'm not sure especially with injuries to Campbell and to Goulden, there's not really a long line of guys in the reserves now that are bashing down the door. So if you drop him, you want to bring in a player who's going to have an impact. And I'm not sure who that player is.
Yeah, I mean, look, Ryan Clark was rewarded from having a couple of massive weeks in the VFL. But as we saw against the Dockers, he's probably just a little bit out of touch at that top level. But maybe he can play himself into some form if he gets the nod. But then there's obviously established AFL players in Sam Gray and Lewis Taylor. But I mean, I prefer Lewis Taylor than Sam Gray just for a youth and future sense. But yeah, look, James Bell, maybe Indigenous round. He is a pretty handy player, but I don't think his performances in the VFL have been screaming out pick me. But this is not really the time to talk about it, but I just think, obviously Blakey has been pushed into the midfield because he's got very good hands for a tall guy. He can help out in the ruck. He had a very nice left kick, but he's just completely out of confidence or something this year. But I think he maybe should be playing in the forward line, because that in his first year he kicked like 19 goals in 21 games. So I don't know, maybe he just gets back into the forward line and gets a bit of confidence. But I don't know. Anyway.
And he was
McLean,
in Fremantle, against Fremantle. He was in the forward line quite a bit against Fremantle, but then he was probably not helped by the fact that the ball wasn't really coming in there much. And Franklin was also the focal point to everything a lot of the time. So of all of those inside 50s that we got, how many would Blakey have even had much of an opportunity to impact? I'm not sure. By the time Papley and Buddy do their bit.
That's true. I think there was just a few efforts that I know a few Swans fans were a little bit miffed about, bumping players instead of tackling. Like, wrap your arms. I know you've got to work on your shoulders and stuff. I love the guy, but yeah, a few efforts. I was like, come on, mate, lay that tackle, or open your. When he got caught holding the ball when he didn't look left, didn't even think to look left, and then he got tackled by, I think it was Collier or something. But we all know he can play very well. So for me, it's just, as you're saying, like, he seems to be rushing, doing overly difficult things. So I don't know. I think, simple is best, and just, probably go back to the VFL, because he went back for 1 week and had a fairly decent game, but then was rushed back in. So yeah, I don't know. When he's playing as that sort of hybrid player, like that ruck backup, I guess, we're a bit stuck, and that's why he was playing there, because he's quite versatile. But ironically, he's become a Lear, and he's sort of playing himself out of the team because he's not getting a chance to get good at one position. But yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, Steven stays in, because I think even though he had, would you say, 10 touches, I think he looked okay. Like I think the more time he spends at top level, the better he's going to get. Surely he holds, right, Stevo?
I think so. Like he didn't do a huge amount of stuff against Fremantle, but he wasn't bad either. And again, like who would you bring in for him? I don't think there's anyone that I'd rather have in the team than him at the moment.
Yeah, me too. All right, look, very quickly, Carlton. We picked this up on the AFL app. They're saying that Jack Martin may come in for Cottrell, and ex-Swans Academy lad Luke Parks could return, or will most likely return now that Plowman has failed to have his 2-match ban for that high hit on O'Meara overturned. So that is what Carlton is looking like. A bit light on the reporting there for Carlton, but them's the breaks. This is a Swans podcast. All right, Stevo. Swannies. Which Swanee flies high and why?
Oh, look, I finally nailed one. It's been months that I haven't been able to get one of these right, but I asked for Buddy to go nuts, and he did. So we can cross him off my list. He's delivered what I asked for. So next in line is Tom Papley. He's been looking lively here and there throughout the year, but he's only gone over the 2-goal mark once, and I think that was in round 3 against Richmond, if I remember, and he kicked 4. So I want to see Papley get 3 or 4, get a decent return on the SCG.
Fire up that local crowd as you can do. Mate, I picked Rowie against the Dockers, and I specifically said 20 plus disposals, 2 goals, and 5 tackles. I think he got 15 disposals, 1 goal, and 5 tackles. So he wasn't far off. But yeah, he didn't play as well as he had in the past couple of weeks. So I was close, but no cigar. For me, Wixie, who is another player that I know Swans fans are saying could do with a week off, but I think you and I can see his value and what he does to the team. I think he holds his spot, and I think he's going to bounce back and kick a couple. He was one self-loathing Signet after that second behind. You could see, I love to see the competitiveness, but geez, he was getting stuck into himself. He was like, all that sort of stuff. So you love seeing that, because you can see the passion in the player, but you also want him to go easy on himself. He's still a young player himself. So I'm backing him in to bounce back, hold his spot, bounce back, and kick a solid couple, and then lay, let's say, 7 tackles. That's my prediction. All right, opposition players. So Carlton, the Blues, who do we need to be wary of?
Oh, for me, it's Walsh. He's a gun. He's like only 20 years old, and he's their best, most important player, I think. And yeah, need to put some work into him. If he gets to run riot, then we might be dealing with another 60 plus inside 50s.
Would you put someone on him, like have a tag on him, or just make sure that he doesn't run away with it?
I'm not sure about a tag necessarily, but certainly make sure that all of the midfielders are aware of him, and whoever happens to be running with him, that through their body work and blocking and positioning, they make his job harder. Because most coaches aren't really running hard tags anymore. It's not really as much of a thing as it was in the past. But yeah, certainly the whole midfield group needs to be responsible for stopping him getting away.
Yeah, I mean, our two probably taggers are Hewitt, and he's in the back line these days. And I know Ryan Clark's had a go at that, and he's probably a fringe player at best. So if Walsh doesn't kick off, then obviously Patrick Cripps, their leader, he can very easily control the game as well. So he's someone to look out for as well. But other than those two guys, for me, it's Harry McKay. He's leading the Coleman on 35 goals. He's in awesome form. And he's a pretty big unit as well. He's 204 centimetres, 105 kilos. In reference, Lobb is 207 centimetres and 106 kilos. So he's not far off that. Obviously, McCartan and Rampy had their hands full against Lobb. And I think the combination of those guys, because they'll do a bit of a job, they'll switch around. They're going to have to really stay focused to minimise his effort and his impact on the game. So that's who we need to look out for me. All right, how do we come away with a victory? What do we do to get the win?
I think be brave. That's the sort of like the slogan for this week from me is, take the game on, move the ball quick, just like they did in parts of that final quarter when, they got a sniff of a win against Fremantle, and just like they've done in many games this year, really. But yeah, be brave, take it on, move the ball fast, give the forwards a chance to put up a score, and then a bit of zip, a bit of energy from the youth would be great as well, I think, and that'll hopefully get us across the line. Because Carlton, we shouldn't underestimate Carlton because they're a decent side, they're a young team, kind of like us on a build. We're maybe a little bit ahead of on the timeline, but not much, and they will be absolutely stinging for a win. And Eddie Betts has a history of tearing it up in these Indigenous round games. So I bet they'll all love to win for him.
Likewise, I mean, they've got Zach Williams, who's new to the club. He's just been shifted back to halfback. He's looking much more at home there. He's an Indigenous player, so he'll be up and about for Marngrook round. And yeah, like Adam Sard, obviously, is another big acquisition. I mean, this is one of the teams you're talking about that's in that sort of, 6 to 12 that are just gunning for our blood, really. So it really is a danger game. And goodness, I agree with you. We need our younger guys to step up, and we also need much better service from our mids for a full 4-quarter effort. We just need more balls going inside the 50, really, and then hopefully we can keep that conversion rate up. Oh, and also if we can mark it, and for goodness sake, lower your eyes. That was a bit of a dig, I know, but I had to say it. That's what I think. All right, let's look at the form of both teams, and we'll start with the win-loss. So obviously, the Swannies are 6 wins and 4 losses, and the Blues are 4 wins and 6 losses. We're coming 6th, they're coming 12th, obviously. Our last 5 has been a loss, a win, a loss, a win, a loss, and theirs has been a loss, a win, 2 losses, and a win. Look, our previous 5 encounters have been pretty close, really. 2020, the Blues beat us by 5. 2019, they beat us by 7. Prior to that, the Swans have really had their measure. So 2017, 2018, 2019, we beat them by 81 points, 30 points, and 19 points. Majority of those games at the SCG. So, home and away doesn't seem to really count. If you just go off the past 2 years, then this game is going to be close. It's probably going to be decided by within double digits. I hope that it doesn't. I hope we can just come out and play with confidence and zip and energy and get the job done. But it is certainly looking like a danger game. With that in mind, Stevo, who are you tipping?
Oh, look, I want to tip Sydney, but I'm not gonna. I want to tip Carlton because at the moment, I just think every time there's one of these 8-point games against another team that's roughly where we're at, we somehow blow it, or most of the time at least. And I don't know. I think I'd be more confident if we were playing the Bulldogs, to be honest. I'm tipping Carlton. I'm sorry, Swans. Yeah, Carlton.
Look, I actually fully agree with you. We've witnessed it this year where we're somehow scraping wins against teams we shouldn't be beating, and yet the teams that we on paper we're like we should win this, not always comfortably, but we should win this. We're losing. So I'm scratching my head. So with that in mind, I'm going conservatively. I'm going same as you. I'm picking the Blues, mate. And it makes me feel dirty doing that. But I've lost a bit of confidence, and it's the Blues for me. I'm wanting to be proven wrong though. So, all right, Stevo. Lastly, if a group of Swans is called a bevy, then what is a group of Blues called?
Mate, I could not find anything. I scoured the whole internet, even the less salubrious parts of the internet, and there's nothing saying what a group of Blues is called. Because, blues isn't really a thing, is it? It's hard to quantify what blues even is. So I think of 3 things: music, colour, and mood when I think of the word blues. So I came up with one for each. So for music, I thought it could be a trumpet of blues. I could imagine a trumpet of blues playing out across the SCG. For the color blue, I have a shimmering of blues. I'm thinking of the sea or the ocean, as it shimmers. And then for the mood, an onset of blues. So I don't know which one you want to pick out of them.
Mate, you are a wordsmith. You're a true poet. And look, I think these are all good options. But something about a trumpet of blues feels fun. I feel like, blues fans wouldn't, I mean, they'd obviously be like, you guys are idiots. Don't call us a trumpet of blues. I think they refer to themselves as blue baggers, which is a funny one as well. I think it's to do with their hat, but I love it. I love a trumpet of blues. Let's go with that, Stevo.
Nice. A trumpet of blues is going to play out
So
on Sunday afternoon.
Awesome. So it's the bevy versus a trumpet on Saturday Arvo. Just quickly before we move on, I should mention that Lance Buddy Franklin kicked 10 goals 2 against the Blues in that 2017 match that we beat them by 81 in. After that, he hasn't kicked bags. He kicked 3-2 in 2018, 2-1 in 2019. Didn't play in round 17 2019 and also didn't play last year with those ongoing injuries. But who knows? Maybe he does go on and kick that bag we were talking about earlier in that middle section, Stevo, if you can replicate that 2017 performance. But just so I share that stat there. Okay, now we're going to look at a couple of games of interest. And I think, Stevo, you're going to kick us off. No, allow me, because I'm looking at the first game of round 11, chronologically speaking. I'm going to look at the first placed Western Bulldogs versus the second placed Melbourne Demons at Marvel on I don't think I've got the date right. It's on Friday night at 7:50 local time. It's the much anticipated top of the table clash, so long as COVID doesn't ruin the party. I think there's been a pause on ticket sales in Melbourne at the moment. Look, in terms of injuries, the Western Bulldogs actually have a few on their long-term injury list. They've got one of my favourite players, Josh Dunkley, who should definitely be a Swan, but isn't, and I will complain about that every other week. They've got Steph Martin, they've got Jong, they've got Richards, joined now by Adam Treloar, their gun recruit from last year, who's done an ankle and he's out for 6 to 8 weeks. Not to mention Easton Wood, who was their one-time captain. But that notwithstanding, I think they're getting Tim English back and Lipinski for Treloar and Scott, who I think had a head knock there with concussion. For the Ds, they don't have as big a long-term injury list. They've got Tomlinson, who did his knee ACL a couple of weeks ago. He's out for the season. And Jack Viney's been on there for a while, but it's looking like he's a test and may be ready for this weekend. So I think, the pundits are saying that Salem, who was rested for a week, he had general soreness. He'll come back in for Jeddah. And then Viney, if he's fit, will most likely take Melksham's spot, just because, there's not much availability in the Demons starting 22. So that's looking like the ins for them. We'll also mention that a player of the, ilk of Ben Brown, I think is running around in the VFL as well. So that shows you just how tight they are for spots there. Their last 5 and their win-loss, the Bulldogs are 9-1. Their 9 wins, 1 loss. Their 1 loss was in round 7 against Richmond. They lost by 22, but their last 5 have been all W's, win, 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 win. Melbourne are exactly the same now. So they're 9 wins, 1 loss. That one loss was last round against Adelaide in Adelaide, where Adelaide beat them by 1 under slightly controversial, circumstances. But so Melbourne are win, 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 loss. And their other closest win was against us when we lost to them by 9. So, Adelaide beat us in that regard, but otherwise the Swans were doing well, as you mentioned much earlier on in tonight's podcast, Stevo. All right, a couple of key players from both sides. I mean, the depth of the Bulldogs midfield is sublime. Stevo, you've previewed the Dogs before. The depth of their midfield is incredible. Bontempelli, who's I think currently a Brownlow medal favourite. McRae is coming first in the league for disposals, averaging 35 a game, and first for score involvements in the AFL with 8.3 a game. Bruce and Norton are on fire. They're coming 3rd and 5th respectively in the race for the Coleman, with Bruce kicking 30 and Norton kicking 27 so far. Then of course you got stalwarts, Libba, Caleb Daniels, who runs a show back in the back line, and then Bailey Smith, Baslenko, who's, a gun. For Melbourne, similarly, they're just as dangerous. They've got Clayton Oliver, who's coming first in the AFL for contested possessions, 18 a game, 3rd for disposals with 32 a game. They've got Petraka, the gun, who's just signed that huge extension. They've got Maxi Gawn, Probably best ruckman in the competition. Their captain, James Jordan, who's come out of nowhere to just be this just fantastic player for them. He's actually coming third in the league for tackles a game. He's 6.9, almost 7 tackles a game. I know I've got him in a couple of fantasy teams, and he is killing it. Jake Lever, he's coming first for intercept possessions, averaging 11 a game. And then you've got the likes of May, who did the job on Buddy against us. And then you've got Salem coming back in, who basically does that quarterback role. So there's gun players across both teams. It really should be a cracker. Right. In terms of a comment for the home team, right, I think I read that the Bont is poised to sign a massive contract extension that should take him through to the end of 2025. So he's 30. So look, if he rolls it on from there, he'll basically be a Bulldog for life. Great news for the Dogs. Fantastic news for him personally. He's a great player. I know a lot of the Swans boys, we've spoken about Bont over the years as a player that we should have hoped to target, but it looks like he's going to stay down there in Western Bulldogs. But that kind of news is galvanising for a team and might actually just give the Dogs the edge. For the Ds, conversely, if Viney can come back, he's a spiritual captain. His father played at the Ds. I think maybe his grandfather did. I'll have to double check that one. But he's not captain at the moment. Gorn is obviously, but he does sort of play with that sort of, I guess, spirit. He really, epitomises what it is to be, a D. And I think that could help. Obviously, they need to bounce back after their first loss of the year, in controversial circumstances. And I think, in fact, the AFL have come out and said that the deliberate handball, the handball that the Crow player, I think Nick Murray did in the last 30 seconds of the game was actually deliberate. I don't know why they do that. I think you and I have spoken about that before, but they came out and contradicted the umpire's call. So, obviously the D's fans will be up in arms about that, but they've got blood in their mouths after that because that leaves an awful taste in the mouth. So they want to come out and right that wrong. That notwithstanding, my tip is the Dogs in a close one at Marvel. The Dogs have more talent. It goes deeper. The Bont is a gun. I just think they're going all the way this year. They're looking probably better than they did in 2016. Look, here's a few other stats to back that up. The Western Bulldogs are currently first in disposal efficiency, first with inside 50 efficiency. They're first in points per game, inside 50s per game, goal assists per game, clearances per game. They currently have the least opposition's points per game, least opposition's tackles per game, least opposition's inside 50 per game, least opposition's clearances per game. So they're killing it offensively, they're using it perfectly, and they're stopping the opposition teams from scoring and tackling, as it seems. So, yeah, Dogs for me, Stevo. How about you?
Yeah, Dogs as well. I think Melbourne's going to drop 2 in a row. It's not the end of the world for them. They'll bounce back, but I don't think they'll beat the Bulldogs this week.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm really hoping there can be a big crowd there. So let's hope that COVID gets under control and there's a big turnout for a highly anticipated game. All right, I'll throw over to you, Stevo. Who are you looking at?
Yeah, and just on that, as far as I understand, right, even if they can't have a crowd there for whatever restrictions the Victorian government decides they need to bring in, they'll still play the game in front of an empty stadium, surely. So the game will go on, I'd imagine. Every other country in the world plays in front of empty stadiums right now.
Yeah, the game will go on. The game will go on. Like we had, wasn't it the showdown earlier between the Eagles and the Dockers when the Dockers got smashed? They played to an empty stadium. Or was it the Dockers and the Roos or something? I think there was a game at Optus Stadium when there was a Perth cluster, and I think it was like 3 people for 72 hours or something like that. There was a lockdown, and there was a game this year where they played in front of no crowd. So I think that will probably happen most likely. They won't cancel the game.
Yeah, okay. Because the only thing that I could see being a problem would be if players need to cross state borders because of those variations. But these are both Victorian teams, so surely there'll be a game no matter what. I hope. Anyway. So the other game we're going to look at is on Saturday at the Gabba, Brisbane versus GWS, so 4th versus 8th, which curiously enough is exactly the same fixture we had last week when 4th plays Brisbane, played 8th plays Richmond again at the Gabba. So 4v8 at the Gabba on a Saturday seems to be the thing for the month of May. Brisbane will probably go in unchanged. They had nothing to report. The Giants, as if the injury list isn't bad enough, young defender Sam Taylor, who's been playing really, really well, actually, is going to miss 8 weeks. they're saying, with ankle surgery, which is a shame for him. And none of their guns seem set to return yet. And I'm just going to give a short list of their injuries, just the bad ones, like the really top players: Caniglio, Davis, De Boer, Green, Hogan, Kennedy. Like, that's 6 very, very good players that aren't at GWS right now because they're hurt. They'll all start to come back within the next month or so after the bye. Recent form, Brisbane's won 6 in a row. They're doing really well. The Giants, after losing their first 3, have gone 5-2 since then, and they've only lost to the Bulldogs and the Tigers, which was by 4 points in that time, so looking pretty good. So 2 teams in some good form. As for key players, I always talk and wax lyric about the Giants midfield. I love the Giants midfield. Kelly, Hopper, Ward, Whitfield, Taranto, Green, who's now come into favouritism for the rising star, young Tom Green from the Giants. So their midfield group, and then Brisbane. And I'm the same. Like, I'm always talking about their forward line, but in a different way. I'm just waiting for the day that it clicks, because the day that Hipwood, Danaher, and Charlie Cameron all just fall into sync, they're going to put up 15 goals between the 3 of them, I think. So that's where I'll be looking in that one. As to who's going to win, look, I think the Giants are going to travel north with a bit of confidence. They're playing some really good footy. They've got some really, really good players who are in form, and their younger ones are stepping up and playing key roles. Sam Taylor, who sadly is injured, is a perfect example of that, but they've got others that are doing good work in the Giants team and supporting all of those superstars that they've got and giving them the chance to shine. Look, it's tempting to pick the upset, but I'm not going to. I think Brisbane's been up for a while. Giants look good versus West Coast. West Coast were pretty ordinary. I watched that game. But Brisbane looked very good against Richmond. It's at the Gabba, so I'm tipping Brisbane.
Yeah, it's got to be the Lions, I think, for me as well, mate. And I'll just add there, Tom Green, what a legend. I'm flagging it again. He really needs. We need to poach him if we can. If we can do anything, like, I don't know. He's actually one of my current favourite players. I just think he's such a smart footy player, and he just adds so much to that already very good GWS midfield. It's an interesting one. It's going to be a very interesting one, I think. I think for all your points you've raised, Lions for me as well, mate.
On Tom Green, actually, before we move on Tom Green, this is just a sort of question I'm throwing out. Is it fair that a bloke like him, who is already clearly established as an AFL quality footballer, is eligible for the Rising Star in his second season as an AFL player?
Well, I guess by the rules of the award or competition, it's fine. But are you saying a player in his second year shouldn't be eligible, or regardless of age? Or
because like there's a couple like him, and I think there's been 2 or 3 others who have also been nominated a second time this year, and to me it somehow takes a bit of the shine off what in my mind is like a rookie award for a genuine rookie. I don't see Tom Green as a rookie player this year. I see him as a bloke who played a good body of football last year and now is starting to come into his own. So I don't know. It's like, it's academic. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, I don't know. I like to see the Rising Star for rookies.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that one for sure. I totally agree, because I had Tom Green as a rookie in a lot of my fantasy teams last year, and he's in a lot of my other teams this year as sort of like an established, like up and coming player. So it does sort of feel weird, but I guess that technically fits within the guidelines. So I don't really care, mate. As long as we get him in red and white, I just want him in that midfield with Millsy. That's what I want.
I just want one of our boys to win it. I want one of our. Well, technically, having said that, Warner shouldn't be eligible either, because he played 2 games last year. But maybe 5 games is fair and 9 is too. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Anyhow, I want one of our Swans to get it.
Yeah, hopefully Gordon and Campbell can come back, and even McDonald could come back and have a bit of an impact in the second half of the year. All right, mate, let's look at the rest of the tips for the round. So started off with first Bulldogs versus the Demons, and we're both going the Bulldogs. Game 2 is 16th place Magpies versus 3rd place Cats at the MCG on Saturday afternoon. I'm going Cats.
Yes, Cats.
Game 3 is 4th place Lions versus 8th place Giants at the Gabba, as you've already introduced. Both going Lions here. Game 4, we've got 14th place Saints versus 18th place Kangaroos at Marvel on Saturday twilight. Jeez, I don't know. Saints, but not with much confidence.
I hope the Saints win, just because we've got them the week after, and if they come up against us on their home ground at Marvel after having lost to the bottom team, they might come out full of energy and do a job on us. So I hope that they belt North Melbourne and get a bit of confidence back, and then we can pop their bubble a week after.
Good strategic tip there, Stevo. I like that. All right, game 5, we've got 15th place Suns versus 17th place Hawks at TIO in Darwin on Saturday night. I'm going to pick the Suns, although I think it's going to be a hard game.
In Darwin, okay, I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
So I mean, Hawthorn just look terrible right now. I think, Suns. Suns don't look good either, to be honest. They're both looking pretty bad, but yeah.
I think it'll be a scrap, but it should be a good affair up there. Game 6, we've got 7th placed Eagles versus 11th placed Bombers at Optus in Perth on Saturday night. Eagles.
Yep, if it was flipped and they were playing in Melbourne, I would tip the Bombers, but it's in Perth, so West Coast.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if the Bombers beat the Eagles away, then the Bombers are actually playing
flag favourites.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Game 7, we've got the 9th placed Tigers, who are out of the 9th. I'll say that again. 9th placed Tigers versus 13th placed Crows at the MCG on Sunday Arvo. The Tigers, even though the Crows did well against the D's, it's got to be the Tigers.
Yeah, I wonder, can the Crows get up against a good team 2 weeks in a row? Probably not. Nah. Yeah, all right. I'll tip Richmond as well.
Fair play. All right, game 8 is Swans and Blues, and you and I are picking the trumpet. We're picking the Blues for reasons we've already stated. All right, game 9, last game of the round. We've got 5th place Power versus 10th place Dockers at Adelaide Oval in Adelaide on Sunday twilight. I'm picking the Dockers. I'm picking the Power, and you're picking?
I'm going to pick the Dockers just because I thought they looked good, and I think that Fremantle are one of those, like, they're a good team, and this is the shortest road trip for them to get across to Adelaide. So Fremantle, yeah, but with not a huge amount of confidence.
Yeah, fair enough. I think Power at home should get the job done. If it was Power away, certainly the Dockers, they would beat them, but they'd kick more behinds doing it.
Yeah, they would for sure.
Yeah. Oh, well, we lost that one. We'll get them next time. All right. Well, Stevo, if you've got nothing else to add, that will bring us to the end of this episode. So on behalf of the Bevy, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's listening. We look forward to you joining us next time. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Bevy of Bloods for updates and announcements. Until then, up the Bloods and can you Swannies.